Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tamiya's 1/48 scale F-35B Lightning II. I know a lot of people have been asking for me to do some modern subjects, so here we go. This one's for you. Enjoy. So then, this one begins in the cockpit. Specifically, I'm cementing the rudder pedals, the joystick, and also the throttle into their designated positions. Then turning my attention to the rear of the cockpit on the bulkhead, it requires one or two extra parts. One can only assume that this is some really complicated electronic box. And before I move on to the ejection seat, the last thing to do on the cockpit is going to be to cement these two sidewalls in place. One thing I don't really like about the F-35 is how bland and basic the cockpit is. There's no cool steampunk dials and switches, unlike the F-4 Phantoms or the Tomcats of their day. Ironically, as I've just said that, the ejection seat itself is beautifully moulded and has lots and lots of detail on it. The one thing I would say is the ejection seat itself is pure black, so it can only be picked out with a nice dry brush. As you can see, the seat is made up of many pieces, but Tamiya makes sure that everything goes together seamlessly. Quite literally. I apologise, that is the only seamless joke that I will make today, I promise you. Now, with all of the cockpit sub-assemblies put together, they can all be based in Mr. Finishing Surfaces 1500 Black as a primer, and then we're going to use Mr. Colours C335 Medium Sea Grey as that base underlying colour. I ensure that I mottle the grey onto the aircraft purely to create some tonal variation and visual interest into that usually quite bland grey colour. Now I can get the hairy stick, also known as a paintbrush, out and block in certain aspects using ammo MIGs, black, red and other colours. After everything has received a unifying coat of VMS's satin varnish, I can get out the dust or buff oil brusher and then very gently dry brush onto these certain areas across the cockpit. This really helps to elevate all of the details and make it look a little bit more three-dimensional. Although Tamiya includes a hell of a lot in the box, one thing they don't do is include any photo etch seatbelts, and I think this was a necessity to really brighten up the otherwise quite bland cockpit. Although the satin varnish did a great job of bringing everything down to a rather flat finish, somewhere which needed a little bit of reflection would be the main screen for all of the pilot's information. So to do this, I used GX100 and just dabbed it where the screen would be. The last thing to now do would be put the cockpit tub into the upper surfaces of the fuselage along with the forward facing fan. It was time to have a look at the nose wheel bay. This was initially just painted with white and then picked out all that detail with the greyish brown Mr. Colour wash. This process was repeated for all four of the aspects within the nose wheel bay. As you can see, they all slot and slide into each other almost like a jigsaw puzzle. It's very impressive engineering throughout the entirety of this kit. So now it's time to build up the front nose section of the F-35. This piece initially slots into the sidewall, and this is where the telescopic crew access ladder will be held. Then the previously assembled nose wheel bay can be slotted into position. The F-35 intakes are a geometric brain fart. They have these weird curves and lumps and bumps coming out of them, but Tamiya have managed to break them up beautifully into these two sections which come together to form a seamless intake, which definitely looks the part. And finally, once the intake fan has been cemented at the back of the intakes, this whole assembly can be cemented on to that front nose section. Now assembled, the nose section can be joined with the upper surfaces of the fuselage. Like the Tamiya way, of course it has perfect fitment. So what you can see on screen now is me building up the rear of the F-35, specifically where the exhaust is. The B variant of the F-35 has the ability to alter the angle of the exhaust to, of course, make it either do a short takeoff or landing, or hover. This isn't decided until a little bit later in the build, but for a pre-warning, I'm going to be doing mine in the fully retracted position. This is the weapons bay for the F-35. It is a beautiful bit of moulding by Tamiya, but unfortunately I'm not going to be displaying it in the open position. So I put some paint on it just to give you an idea of what it would look like, but unfortunately it's going to all be sealed up. Although I think this might warrant another F-35 build on the channel, just so I have the opportunity to paint and fully detail it up for you guys. Anyway, it is slotted into the lower section of the fuselage, followed by that rear exhaust assembly. The main wing spar also hosts the place for the main wheelbase, so make sure you paint and detail them up before you get it cemented onto the model. The wing spar also hosts the position for the pilot holes for the main landing gear legs. These come into play later and is a brilliant bit of engineering. All of the aspects have now been cemented down onto the aircraft, so what we can do is join it with the top half of the fuselage, encapsulating and securing everything inside. Now to finish off the shape and really make it look like an F-35, I'm going to go around the aircraft, cementing and securing body panels on to really give it that final shape. The F-35 is absolutely stacked with sensors. So to try and replicate this on the front section of the nose, what I've done is got some of that holographic film, which you might have seen me use in previous videos, and secured it on to the back part of one of the transparent parts. What this will hopefully do is, as you can see in this clip, give the effect of one of these infrared sort of sensors which are seemingly present on all modern aircraft. It is at this stage of the build where you choose what nozzle position you would like to go for. As I was going into the parked position, I followed the instructions accordingly. Now that GX100 has dried, the control panel can be cemented into the anti-glare shield, and then that assembly can be cemented into the forward portion of the cockpit. Now time to work on a couple more sensors. This time we're going to be working on the one which is under the nose of the aircraft, and I believe this is one which has that incredibly powerful camera which allows it to drop bombs from like 30,000 feet. I once again utilised the holographic film to try and emulate from what I've seen from reference images. The sensor is cemented into position first, but then the prism-like protective glass which goes over it, singular moulded by Tamiya, very impressive, can be secured into place using some ultra glue. Now to protect all of the cockpit, I'm going to be using one of the two provided canopies in the kit. One of them could be used if you wanted to interchange the cockpit between being opened and closed, but I knew I always wanted mine to be open, so I just sacrificed this canopy for the greater good. With everything masked off, we could get on to painting. So initially everything receives a unifying coat of Mist Finishing Surfacer 1500 black, and then we can go on to a very new technique to this channel, called the layered ink patina effect. And pretty much what this does is it creates a pre-shade, but a very authentic looking marbled pre-shade for you to then paint on top of to create a very authentic navy salt worn corrosion paint finish. That was a lot of words, but I hope you get what I mean. What it does is it uses X20A acrylic thinner and Liquitex white acrylic ink, and it is almost a little bit of chemistry. So you kind of put the X20 down, then you, whilst it's still wet, put the ink on top, and then you start to stipple it and manipulate it into these really tight and blotchy looking patterns. So when you then paint on top of it with your chosen colour, it gives the effect that that paint is being corroded and eaten away by the salt water. I think this was something which I really wanted to try out on the F-35 after I saw this image here. This is an F-35C which has obviously been at sea for quite a while, but look, it's really battered and it looks like it's degrading, and I think this was a great way to kind of create a new argument into the F-35 debate, which is already a very controversial topic, but now let's weather them and they can get weathered. Everyone knows the F-35 for being so clean and stealthy, but here they are looking a bit more battered, and I think it looks really good. So after the ink had dried and it left that pre-shade effect, all I had to do was use SMS's Have Glass Grey, which is a superb paint by the way, and I think the colour is bang on for that Have Glass Grey, which is a very impressive thing to do. Anyway, once it had all been started to blend in, this was the effect that I was left with, and I was really happy. It really looked like those photos. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect at this stage, but the vision was there. It definitely needed a little bit of grit, a bit of grime from a panel wash, and a bit more weathering products. But before I could do that, I had a little bit more work to do. So what I had to do was go around the aircraft and mask off certain panels and different lines, which had to be sprayed in a lighter grey. The lighter grey colour which I'm going to use is going to be Mr. Colours C335, which is the medium sea grey. And now, once everything had been demasked, this is what the F-35 was looking like. You can see that as you change it around, the different lights, different aspects of the shading kind of pop out at you, and then it just morphs into nothingness, which I think is really interesting to me at least. So to protect the paintwork, everything gets given a layer of GX100 gloss, and then the decals can go on top. The decals themselves were from Kit's World, and they were not very good. They disintegrated, got all bubbly, and I had to then end up peeling them off and replacing them with the in-kit Tamiya ones, which I was a little bit disappointed about. But there you go, you win some, you lose some. So then for the weathering, I'm going to be using the Flory Wash Dark Dirt, and this is applied all over the airframe and then it can be wiped off when dry. This did a great job of highlighting any of those recessed details, but also leaving some nice authentic streaks around the aircraft. After I'd left this to dry, the entire airframe received a generous coating of VMS's matte varnish. Now it's time to start to bring everything together. So first of all on my list, I wanted to cement the main landing gear legs into position. These slot into place with those two pegs and result in a really nice tight and secure fitment. I repeat this process on both sides. Now turning my attention to the nose landing gear, what I first have to do is snip off this piece at the back, and then just like magic, the landing gear leg lowers into position. Another great bit of smart engineering from Tamiya. Now the control surfaces can be fitted, so the slats go on, the flapperons, and also the iconic vertical stabilizers in their unique position. I wanted my F-35 to be displayed in the beast mode, so this means it has external pylons with external stores. Mine's going to be loaded up with 4 GBU-12s and then 2 AIM-9Xs. The GBUs are painted blue to indicate that they are going to be training bombs. I thought this was going to be a bit more interesting rather than the normal olive drab. To have a little bit more fun, I'm also going to be adding a figure to this kit. This little fella is made by the people over at ResKit, and I must say it is a beautiful figure. Really well moulded and fits onto the ladder perfectly. Now the final bit of building for this kit, here I am putting together the exhaust. You have 5 of these external pieces which kind of slot around this ring, and I must say it is a great bit of engineering because once again they all slot into position without any visible seams. To paint it up, it initially gets based in Mr. Finishing Surfaces 1500 Black, and then I'm going to be utilising Mr. Colours Dark Earth from the RAF range, and black basing it onto the nozzle to introduce some shading. Once I was happy with the initial basing, everything could be blended in a uniform coat. Then the last bit of painting was going to be to highlight all of the very tips in a metallic silver colour. And then finally, for the cherry on top, I'm going to be using Mr. Weathering Colours Ground Brown to introduce some oil and a little bit of leakage and a bit more texture into the nozzle. And there you go, so that was the final result. I was pretty happy with how that one turned out. To take it one step further though, I purchased this Detail and Wonder set from Hannants London, and it includes all of the FOD covers for the F-35. After they were given a quick coating of red, they could be pushed into position, and my goodness, what a difference that makes. Really adds another level of life to this model. Now that it was ready, it could be fitted onto the model and then closed back up. It's a similar story for the front facing intake covers as well. They fit perfectly and could just be cemented on with a little bit of ultra glue. Now it is time to take off all of the masking tape from all of the sensors, and luckily there was no overspray and the holographic film still looked just as good as when I put the masking tape on. Great success. After I added the FOD covers, I thought something was missing, and that was remove before flight tags. So I cut a few out, twisted them, and stuck them onto a few of the GBUs and also onto the FOD covers. Once the access door for the ladder had been cemented into position, the figure and the ladder itself can also be fitted in. Finally, the last thing to do is going to be fitting the canopy, and that about finishes this build up. So thank you very much for watching this video. I really do hope that you've enjoyed my take on an F-35. If you did, please let me know down in the comments below. I will be at Scale Model World this weekend, so if you are there as well and you do see me, make sure you grab me and say hello. I want to meet as many of you as possible this weekend. Anyway, without any further ado, enjoy the final photos and videos, and I will see you next time, guys. Bye bye.